He grew up learning his father's art, assassination, no magic, just pure killing skill. And one rule, protect his sister no matter what. So when she enters the Magic Academy, he follows. Nobles, politics, targets everywhere. The hero's daughter under constant threat, and a school full of people who think magic and status decides everything. They have no idea what they're dealing with, because while they're studying spells, he's already decided who needs to be eliminated. This story begins with the protagonist, Asari Cloud, hanging out laundry and remarking on the beautiful weather. His younger sister, Emma, handing him his wet clothes, replied, "It's just perfect for the Hero's Day." He thought, the Hero's Day is an annual festival held in honor of the hero who defeated the Demon King. The world was peaceful today, too. At that moment, his system device announced that he had to go to work. The protagonist narrowed his eyes, lost in thought, and then told his sister to forgive him, as he had to go to work. The girl exclaimed in confusion, "But didn't they promise to go to the Hero's Day together?" He apologized to her again. Emma grabbed his cape and asked sadly, "What's his job? It's not dangerous, is it?" The MC froze for a moment, then patted her head with a smile and said, "Just cleaning." "Has he ever returned home wounded?" The girl replied, "No," he said. "Well, as she can see, the job is safe. But thank goodness she's so worried about him." His sister giggled sheepishly. After a while, Asari grabbed the man's face and asked gloomily, "He's Gordon, right?" The man pleaded, "Make him stop, he'll pay." "How much does he need?" The protagonist replied to his victim. His old man once told him that assassins should never negotiate with their enemies. With these words, the protagonist completed his job of eliminating the man. Blood splattered the walls and floor. Having eliminated the others, he looked around and thought, his job is killing. Then he approached the window and said thoughtfully, "The hero's festival is already in full swing." He treated Emma badly. A cleaning woman with a bandage on her face entered and noticed that behind the facade of the festival, where they pray for peace, people continue to die. "Funny, isn't it?" MC told the cleaning woman she was late. The girl looked around and grumbled, "He's made such a mess again." She started washing away the blood, he remarked. "She can clean it up perfectly, right?" The cleaning woman replied, "Well, yes, in principle, but Crow Rainwater's work was quiet and beautiful. Unlike his, Asari Rainwaters." The protagonist replied gloomily, "He's Asari Cloud, and that name hadn't come cheap. Just let her bury his old name already." The girl said, "What a pity. Crow was the world's #1 assassin." He replied, "For him, that man was just a tyrant father." He remembered how, as a child, his father often told him during training that he was weak. "Is he really his son?" the cleaning woman said, continuing her work. "But if that's how they make money, that means the right thing for their goal is coming soon, right?" MC replied, "That's right. Finally, he'll be able to send Emma to school." When he told his sister about this, she asked in surprise. "School?" He replied, "That's true. He wants her to go to school properly. He's earned enough money for that." Emma protested. "No way. Let him spend the money he worked so hard to earn on himself." He thought sheepishly, what a good girl his sister was. She continued, "She can't do that. For her to be the only one studying at school, making friends, being recognized by boys, enjoying a life full of excitement." Asari clutched his head in confusion and thought, "She's cute. She'll definitely be popular." The possibility of some idiot taking her away from him. The decision came instantly. He said that he would go to school too. His sister was overjoyed. A few months later, one day, he came out to her in his school uniform. Emma, already dressed in the uniform, exclaimed admiringly how it suited him. He replied sheepishly, "She's cute too. She's grown so much." Opening the door, the protagonist asked, "So, are they coming?" At that moment, a girl fell face down in front of them. Emma asked in fear, "Did she fall dead?" He looked at the fallen Yuri in bewilderment. After a while, when a girl came to her senses, biting into a bun, she joyfully exclaimed, "She's saved." She almost died of hunger. The protagonist asked in confusion why she was near their house. Yuri replied, "They have a perfect view of the royal capital from here, right?" She wanted to take a look around before enrolling, but since she hadn't eaten, no wonder she fainted. He thought in surprise. Enrollment? He wondered out loud. Is she a newcomer too? Because of her, they'd missed the initiation ceremony too. He thought, now would be Emma's finest hour. Before he could finish the thought, his sister exclaimed indignantly, "Don't let him say that." Yuri said it was fine. If only they weren't so hungry, they would already be there. With these words, the girl drew a magic circle of water right on the table, which greatly surprised MC. After that, she stood up and cast a spatial transfer. At that moment, the school representative announced, "Student Representative Yuri Maxwell, please come forward," but no one was there. The representative's assistant whispered. It seemed they hadn't arrived. Suddenly, magic circles appeared on the floor, and as if out of nowhere, Asari, Emma, and Yuri appeared. The protagonist thought in amazement, "This is spatial transfer? Transferring several material entities. Do they even realize how complex casting a spell must be?" The Academy representative's assistant admiringly said, as expected, "The child of the hero Yuri Maxwell," Emma exclaimed in surprise. "The child of the hero?" MC noticed. "Seriously?" The students began muttering among themselves, "This is the child of the one who defeated the Demon King. Rumor had it she was enrolling this year, but to appear like this?" Asari thought, "So that's her?" Seeing his table, where they'd recently had tea, on the stage, he wondered perplexed. What was the point of a table? Then Yuri addressed the students and said that 15 years had passed since the Demon King's fall. They were living in a time of peace. She was entering the academy as a student in the 27th intake. Her father father had helped organize such a solemn ceremony for them. The protagonist noted that the table remained in place. After that, he looked at the students and thought, as one would expect from a prestigious academy of the great magical nation of Atrasia, what a variety of races and ages. He'd only enrolled because Emma had pressured him, but perhaps there were things to learn here too. But this girl stood out from the crowd. Yuri repeated her name again and added that she was very pleased to meet him. The protagonist asked if she was the hero's child. That meant she was an aristocrat, right? Even if she wasn't one of them, they were glad to meet her. The girl was indignant, wondering what kind of outdated views he was expressing. No distinctions based on status or race. That's the ironclad rule of Fiana Academy. She'll be friends with whoever she wants. She grabbed Emma's hands and exclaimed. The two of them saved her when she collapsed on the road, and she's glad she's made her first friends. She hopes for good relationships. Both MC and Emma thought in surprise. Friends? He noted. Friends are those who share the same goals and actions, who communicate closely. He thought that would be difficult to achieve, but she was saying they were already friends? Or was there something else behind that? He said his name out loud to her and added that he was also pleased to meet her. They shook hands. Yuri looked at him carefully and noticed, it's quite a firm shake, isn't it? He wondered in surprise. What's wrong with this girl? She continued. His manners are perfect. Not a single flaw can be seen. He walked beside her, but his footsteps were completely silent. Asari responded sheepishly. Probably due to his habit of walking quietly so as not to wake Emma. He put an arm around his sister's shoulders and said they needed to go buy study materials. Yuri called out to him, but he figured he definitely didn't want to get any closer to her. Emma turned to him and sheepishly said she wanted to get along better with this girl. Both the protagonist and the hero's daughter looked at her in surprise. His sister's request outweighed his self-defense, and the protagonist sheepishly replied, well, it can't be helped. The girls hugged each other, and Yuri suggested Emma go shopping after school. After a while, the girls went to buy study materials. Yuri said it would be great if MC came along too. Emma replied that her brother had things to do too, so it couldn't be helped. The hero's daughter remarked, combining work and study. What a worthy brother she has. Emma was pleased to hear this. On the way, she mentioned that neither she nor her brother had any friends. The village where they lived was very remote, and there were no children her age, so if she could make friends with her brother, she would be very happy. Yuri replied, of course. Emma exclaimed, how wonderful. At that moment, the girls were captured. At that moment, the protagonist sensed that something was wrong with his sister. He immediately rushed towards where Emma's aura drew him. He thought in confusion, what's going on? Something's happening to her. At that moment, one of the bandits, peering into the carriage and seeing the two girls, said in surprise, one extra. The plan was only about the hero's child, right? His comrade replied, no problem, she's top-notch. They could have a little fun with them themselves. If they'd made it this far, then it was all in the bag, right? The comrade was about to object, but at that moment, his companion's head was smashed, and he collapsed to the ground. The comrade leaned over him in confusion and exclaimed, what happened? Let him pull himself together. Another comrade appeared from behind the cart and also asked, what happened? The boy replied, he doesn't even know. He suddenly collapsed. At that moment, the protagonist appeared before them, glaring angrily at them as he asked, in a terrifying voice, what have they done to his little sister? The mercenaries stared at him in surprise. Then one of them said in bewilderment, that little brat took that guy out single-handedly? Well, he's out of luck. They kill for a living. They're so-called assassins. He thought, he doesn't even sense magical power. That's just a little kid. The protagonist chuckled and asked again, assassins? The boy answered, right, they're the ones who made even the hero who defeated the Demon King suffer. They're the assassins who rule the world from the shadows. His comrade whispered, does he really like those stories? The boy whispered back, the mere mention of the word assassin usually frightens people. Such a small idiot would tremble and be unable to move from the spot in fear. He turned to the MC and shouted, if he understood everything, let him get out of here quickly. Of course, if he could escape. At that moment, he received such a blow that blood gushed from his face, sending him flying a considerable distance away, screaming in pain. His comrade watched his flight path in fear, sweating with fear. Asari said, assassins shouldn't reveal information about himself. Their organization talks rather freely, don't they? The surviving boy shouted to his comrade who was driving the carriage to get the carriage out of here quickly. But his comrade also showed no signs of life, his head and neck covered in blood. The boy thought in bewilderment about MC. Wasn't he just a little boy? Who the hell was he? He cursed and, activating his magic power, summoned a deep fog. A very thick fog appeared in the air, obscuring visibility. The boy grabbed Yuri and, as he ran, thought, before the thick fog cleared, he needed to at least deliver the hero's child to the rally point. At that moment, Asari jumped into the carriage, examined his sister, and announced with relief that she was sleeping. Then he jumped onto the roof of the carriage, activated his morphing and stortio skills, and aimed his combat blaster at the boy running with Yuri. He declared, as long as Emma was safe, that was enough for him. Taking aim, he shot at the bandit, destroying him, and ran toward Yuri, who had fallen from her captor's arms. Touching her cheek, the protagonist said with a smile, "After all, she is Emma's first friend." Sometime later, the hero Ray Maxwell arrived at the academy in the girls' quarters. Instructor Michaela muttered in confusion, "Why is he here?" Her colleague replied, "They say Yuri fainted at the entrance to the dorm." The hero entered his daughter's room. She was sitting pale on her bed. Seeing him, she turned to him, confused. Ray said, "That's not like her." "What, she made friends and then relaxed?" The girl replied, "No." Her father frowned and said, "He'll handle this himself. When she's outside the academy, he'll assign her security." Yuri objected. "What, he's saying such a thing? She came here to become a strong and worthy warrior like him. She doesn't need security," he said. "Become a strong and worthy warrior. And then what? She has a target, killers." He looked closely at his daughter and continued. "Because of the world her father defended by defeating the Demon King, those who kill for money walk free and have become tools in political games, right?" The girl exclaimed. "She will create a world where assassins are no longer needed. She needs power for this, and that's why she wants to guard the world he created with him." Ray looked at her sheepishly and said, "Of course, assassins are cowardly idiots who deceive and strike from behind. That's why he's warning her. She can't handle it. She should stay away from assassins." But Yuri didn't back down. She would definitely achieve this, because she was the daughter of the world's strongest hero, the one who defeated the Demon King himself. Ray squatted near the door and thought in despair, if only his daughter knew it wasn't true. He wasn't the one who defeated the Demon King. He couldn't do it. He couldn't defeat the Demon King alone. This powerful adversary was, in fact, defeated by an assassin from the Crimson Crow organization named Crow Rainwater. But the country took credit for the defeat, and he wasn't even given a chance to speak. The man covered his face with his hands, thinking sadly, why did he die? Sometime later, the protagonist, sitting on his bed in his room, looking at the weapon, said, "To think such a thing so soon after receiving it." His system friend asked in bewilderment, could it really be that the aristocratic faction was trying to use the hero's daughter as a bargaining chip? He replied that he didn't care about such political intrigues. If anyone threatened Emma's peaceful life at the academy, he would eliminate them quietly and preemptively, because he was an assassin. When Ray left the academy, the guards greeted him and said they had been awaiting his return. He thanked them for their service and left, dejected by his situation. The guards were puzzled by his haggard appearance. He seemed more like a statesman than a hero. Perhaps he was weighed down by the country's affairs. Ray sighed mournfully, covered his face with his hand, and said he absolutely doesn't understand what his daughter is thinking. The guards were surprised. So it was just a father's anxiety? The man thought he'd planned to provide his daughter with a safe school life, but she'd been kidnapped on her very first day. And then she declared she was going to fight the assassins. All the bandits were dead. Even taking into account their carelessness, they were experienced enough to easily kidnap her. Not only the man who ordered the bandits, but also the mysterious third party who had defeated them. He needed to find out who they were, the ones who had protected his daughter. The next day, the brother and sister met Yuri at the academy. They wished each other good morning. MC asked the girl in surprise, "She looks depressed. Is everything all right?" She told Emma that it was because of her that she was in danger. She thought she wouldn't want to talk to her anymore. Emma countered, "That's not true at all. Let her please behave as usual." Yuri squeezed her hands gratefully. Asari said he was glad his sister was a good child. The hero's daughter remarked, "It's true. She is so grateful to her." Looking at him, the girl added with a smile, "She's very grateful to him too." The girls went their separate ways, and he looked at Yuri in surprise. He thought he was just doing this for his sister, that's all. After a while, an instructor named Michaela introduced herself to the students and said that today she would explain the devices necessary for mages. Emma repeated in surprise, "Devices?" The girl showed a pen and told the students to look at it. She activated her magical power, spun the pen in space, and a nearby mannequin was cut in half in the blink of an eye. All the students gasped in amazement. "Wow," Michaela explained. "It's a device that helps activate wind magic. Thus, it helps channel their magical power." So she understood. There's no need for complex, lengthy incantations or the creation of magic circles. The high rotation speed produces high power. Of course, not everyone can use this. Compatibility between a person's magical power and the device is also important. Looking at the students' surprised faces, she smiled and remarked, "Even listening to the explanation still doesn't quite make sense, does it?" The protagonist wondered, "Is she really talking about this?" The instructor continued, "So they'll be holding a mock battle between students who already have the devices. These will be Yuri, the hero's daughter, Ray Maxwell, and Matthew from the Valmont family." Yuri extended her hand to him and said, "It's a pleasure to meet him." The boy looked at her with disdain and arrogantly said, "She, the daughter of an upstart, shouldn't dare speak to him so familiarly." He was even irritated that the hero's daughter's admission had become a topic of conversation. The daughter of a former commoner who had simply defeated the Demon King by chance, becoming a noble. All the students watched them with amusement. Only MC and Emma tensed at the arrogant boy's words. Asari thought about how, during the magical war, the country hadn't had enough people to fight the demons, and the government had recruited punitive forces widely, even from commoners. As a result, this helped to identify talented people among the common people. The hero was a typical example of someone who rose to prominence during those times. He'd heard there were nobles who couldn't accept the transition from aristocracy to egalitarianism, and this boy was a typical example of such people. Matthew continued, he should be grateful to the teacher. After all, it was she who had given him the chance to put the upstart in his place. Yuri remained silent, and only her gaze revealed how angry she was. The protagonist thought, now they'll see what she's capable of. Mikhaila raised her hand and declared, let the fight begin. When Yuri drew her weapon and began chanting, her opponent looked at her carefully, thinking, a sword? The girl, having finished her incantations, swung her weapon, and the sword created a powerful barrage of fire. Emma exclaimed in surprise. A sword engulfed in flames? The protagonist also exhaled in surprise. Matthew sneered. A mundane design, typical of a commoner. He pulled out a bubble flute device and placed it to his lips, activating his magic. Then, he attacked Yuri, shouting, let her receive this. His signature spell is a water-based one. Fire is weak against water. The logic couldn't be simpler. Even a child could understand it. But Yuri dispelled his magic without even straining or making any unnecessary movements. Her opponent looked at this in bewilderment. All the students were confused by what had just happened. The protagonist was astonished, thinking she'd vaporized water magic with fire. Such a feat was only possible if the disparity in magical power was colossal. Was Yuri that powerful, or was it her device that was generating such incredible power? She looked defiantly at Matthew and asked, is that all? Then it's her turn to attack. The girl brought her fire sword to her face, summoned a mirage of Fata Morgana, and attacked her opponent. An incredible wave of heat scorched Matthew, and he involuntarily covered himself with his hands. Just as the hero's daughter lunged forward, the opponent was perplexed, thinking, such a straightforward dash. Her silhouette was blurry. He couldn't register it. He hadn't realized how she'd appeared behind him and pressed her sword to his chest. He froze in confusion. Yuri said, it's her device, Lavatine. A fire sword. Mikhaila declared, the fight over. Yuri turned to Matthew and said she knew there were still people clinging to the ideology of aristocratic superiority. Her father, by his own example, was trying to prove that there were talented people even among commoners. She would be his support, and she would force him to admit it. He would be able to see for himself later. Matthew lowered his head in embarrassment, and she walked past him. MC grunted in surprise. The teacher approached Matthew and asked if he was okay. The boy responded with a dejected and irritated expression. He had simply let his guard down. Then he turned and glared at Yuri, who approached an admiring Emma. The girl returned her device to its original form. Now the sword was like a pendant. She said that her magic apparently resonated well with the attribute of fire. This device embodied any phenomena associated with flame for her. Emma asked in surprise, is it really possible to make it that tiny? How stylish. Asari remarked, swords are cool, right? Yuri replied with a smile, of course they are. Swords are romantic. Emma said she wondered what attributes they'd get. It was so exciting. The protagonist muttered, confused. He didn't have magical power, so he couldn't use such devices. His sister asked in surprise, is that true? He replied in the affirmative and added, forgive me for being so happy without knowing it. Emma hugged him, laughed, and said, it's fine, don't worry. Yuri thought, apparently that was true. A mage is surrounded by a source of magical power, magical atoms. As long as magic exists, it's an immutable law. But the protagonist really is completely empty. A complete lack of magic is rare. They say such people have compensatory physical abilities, but she hadn't seen that yet. He, meanwhile, patted his sister on the head and summarized, well, something like that. Then MC turned to Yuri and said she was knowledgeable about selecting devices, so let her help Emma with a consultation, okay? Emma asked in surprise, was he going away on business again? He replied that he was, and apologized for leaving her. After a while, an assistant came to Lord Ferdius and asked if he had called for him. The Lord asked about Ray's daughter. How many guards were assigned to protect her? The assistant replied that 4 landkeepers were deployed on the academy grounds. Ferdius wondered if that was enough. After all, that would only provide security within a very narrow radius. The hero's daughter could become the academy's symbol. For the sake of a future where talent is promoted based on merit, without regard for origin, she must be protected at all costs. The assistant assured him they had selected only competent people, so he needn't worry. Ferdius said to send him the data on these employees later. Meanwhile, the mercenary watched Ferdius from a nearby rooftop. He thought, this is the man known as the hero's brain. For the aristocrats, he's a threat, promoting ideas of egalitarianism. He plots to kill his opponents to push his doctrines. Yes, these aristocrats are scary. At that moment, the protagonist said behind him, what a pitiful sight. The mercenary flinched in surprise, and he said gloomily that if Ferdius died, they would be able to prevent the new era that the hero was building. He doesn't agree with the thinking of such an old-fashioned ghost, does he? Unbeknownst to the visitor, he activated his device and thought, when did he appear behind him? He doesn't sense any magical power from it. With these thoughts, he threw a small fireball at him. but the protagonist was prepared, so he easily dodged the attack. An explosion echoed through the air. The mercenary shouted, "Good reaction," but thinking that some guy without magic could stand up to him was stupid. With these words, he wanted to attack him head-on with his bare hands, but MC dealt him a blow with such crushing force that the mercenary flew off like a ball. He looked at Asari in bewilderment and thought, such speed and strength without magical enhancement? Who the hell was he? He wondered out loud, confused, who the hell he was anyway. The protagonist, looking at him, recalled an episode from his childhood. His father had strapped him to the board, and holding a syringe with a solution in his hand, asked, "Is he ready?" He was about to tamper with his body. The protagonist exclaimed in fear. What did he mean? Crow said after that, he would no longer be able to use magic normally. Anyone who looked at him would think he was a weak commoner. However, within him lay a vast reserve of magical power. In exchange for the inability to cast spells, his body would gain the ability to constantly use superhuman physical abilities. This is perfect for an assassin. MC then screamed indignantly, "No, this is too inconvenient. Besides, is he in his right mind? Interfering with a child's body? What kind of father is he after that?" But Crow asked, "He wants to protect Emma, right? Then it's necessary." Asari sighed heavily and said, "He understood." Father said, "He's great. There will be hellish pain for a week, but he can handle it." The protagonist asked in surprise, was he serious? Father laughed and said that if he can handle it, it will be a gift. And now he swung his leg to deliver another blow to the enemy. The mercenary activated his magic, which dissipated almost immediately. He thought, it can't be, as if he's going to get into a head-on fight with a guy whose identity he doesn't know. With these thoughts, he turned sharply and began to run away from him. The protagonist chuckled and noted that in his place, he probably would have run away too. Holding the weapon in his hand, he said, as soon as they realize he has no magic and can't attack from a distance, they immediately start keeping their distance. But he has this. With these words, he aimed at the mercenary's back, recalling his father's words about him no longer being able to use magic. But his self-designed device would become a tap for the immense magical power dormant within his body. It would become a force that would serve his purposes. So, if he drew his gun, let him fire. With these thoughts, he locked onto the target and fired. At that moment, Fiana, hearing the shot, became wary. His assistant suggested that perhaps it was the sound of monsters being cleared. The Lord replied that the sound was too close for the forest. Let him go and check. The assistant replied that he understood and disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, Emma and Yuri were having lunch. The hero's daughter, hearing the shot, became wary. Emma, surprised, asked, "What's wrong with her?" The girl asked if she'd heard something like an explosion outside. Emma replied, "No, not really." Yuri said, "She must have imagined it." MC's sister, after trying the sandwich, exclaimed delightedly, "It's so delicious." Her poor brother, he can't eat because of work. Maybe they should ask them to set some aside for him? Yuri replied, "That's a great idea." At that moment, Matthew, secretly watching her, thought angrily, "She's embarrassed him. He'll definitely get revenge on her." Sometime later, in the Valmont family mansion, Matthew's father, Marcus, irritably remarked, he heard that he, his son, lost to the hero's daughter. The boy lowered his head and replied sullenly, he'd underestimated her. But next time, he'll definitely beat her. Marcus loudly slammed his cane on the floor and thought angrily, the hero and Fiana's influence has only been growing lately. Moreover, if they start talking at that academy about the hero's daughter being talented, it will only make the situation worse. He won't let things go according to plan. He asked Matthew out loud, irritated. Compared to his older brother, who was the best, who was he? Was he really a loser? Don't let him disappoint him. Matthew winced at his words, sweating from the exertion, and replied that he understood everything. Sometime later, in testing room number 7 at the academy, Michaela told the students that today they would all take a test to measure their abilities. Combat is largely determined by magical power and physical strength. By breaking these parameters down and evaluating them, they obtain key indicators for determining their fighting style and the appropriate equipment. She continued, ranks would be clearly defined, so she asked everyone to give it their all, without slacking off. The students were excited. Michaela turned to Matthew and noted with a smile that his older brother was exceptionally talented. The last mock battle had been disappointing, but she had high hopes for him. One of the students said to his friend, "This guy's older brother, if he's not mistaken, was the vice captain of the royal capital?" The friend replied that he was. Matthew, overhearing their conversation, thought angrily, everyone's only talking about his brother. Even him. He's a descendant of the Valmont family. After the test, his magic accuracy showed a level S. The students marveled at the incredible precision. To create such a precise difference between the left and right sides, that's what noble blood means. Matthew, hearing their words, replied with superiority, "It goes without saying." Yuri was next in line. Her magic accuracy showed a level SS. Matthew was dumbfounded by these results. The students were also perplexed. It can't be. Is this the ability of a hero's daughter? Matthew grimaced angrily. Next, in the destructive power test, Emma's magical power showed a level SS. The students began to exclaim in surprise, "This girl, she's a commoner, right? Where did such power come from?" The Valmont scion thought angrily, how could he not take a single first place? This was simply unacceptable. and if he lost to a commoner it would be a disgrace to his family. He pushed the students aside, pushing one girl especially hard. She would have fallen if the protagonist hadn't caught her, asking if she was okay. The girl thanked him for his help. Matthew jumped to the vessel with the measuring liquid, stretched his hands over it, and thought if he followed in his brother's footsteps, he would definitely take first place. His overall magic power showed an S. He thought, good. Next was MC. His accuracy, strength, and total capacity stats were all equal to E. He thought that was natural. After all, it only responded to his old man's device. Matthew sneered contemptuously and thought, even for a commoner, being a complete zero is not something anyone wants. Only the physical strength test remains. If he takes first place here, he still has a chance to become the top student. When the students entered the next room, the heat took their breath away. Matthew choked, wondering with displeasure, what kind of heat was this? Sig was the first to take the test. He crushed the training golem with a single blow. Michaela noted with surprise that he'd overdone it a bit. The students murmured in surprise. Was this guy even human? Matthew looked at him with bewilderment and anger. Asari thought in surprise. This Sig wasn't bad, actually. Michaela said regretfully, bending over the doll. The physical strength test is cancelled for today. She'll fix it by morning. Sig's strength and endurance stats showed SS, martial arts A. Matthew dismissively told the boy, this is too barbaric. What kind of upbringing do their parents give commoners at home? Sig calmly replied, he doesn't have parents. His grandmother taught him everything he needs to know. Emma looked at him sympathetically. The protagonist thought it wasn't uncommon for commoners to be left without parents. After all, many commoners, selected as warriors for the magical war, were sent to the front lines. Matthew answered Sig, I see. So he didn't receive a proper education. Now everything fell into place. At that moment, to the surprise of both Yuri and the protagonist, Emma jumped up and slapped him hard. After that, she indignantly said, that was simply outrageous. Make him apologize immediately. Matthew, growing angry, pushed her away forcefully. Sig wanted to stand up for her, but the Valmont scion stopped him with a wave of his hand, telling him not to get too cocky. MC ran to his sister, hugged her, and glared at the offender. Matthew exclaimed contemptuously, they, commoners, don't even realize how much they, aristocrats, have given them. Instead of gratitude, they try to rank with them. They're impudent, inferior idiots. Yuri, holding back her anger, said, in their academy, superiority is determined solely by personal upbringing. It's time to stop dividing people into aristocrats and commoners. Matthew chuckled and said, this is typical hero sophistry, isn't it? After these words, he told his henchmen they were leaving. Emma turned to Sig and told him to forgive her. It was because of her that everything had gotten so messed up. The boy responded sheepishly, feeling uneasy, but she was angry because of him, right? She's a good person. Asari glared after Matthew. Sometime later, in the boys' dormitory, in the room of the Valmont family's son, his henchmen were engaged in conversation. One of the boys said he'd heard the atmosphere at school had changed since last year, but he never thought such a traditional academy would be so lenient towards commoners. The second boy said, it's just sickening. They turned to Matthew, who was standing silently by the window, and asked what he thought about this. He replied, isn't that guy's name Asari? A weakling who doesn't even try to fight back. After all, he has zero magic power, so he's easy to deal with. First, we need to teach this guy a lesson. And then, one by one, teach the others their place as commoners. He thought, those with power rule over those without. He'll show him, just like his brother and father did. The boys said, well, of course, it's Matthew. Then, they're calm. The comrades said goodbye and went their separate ways. The culprit himself remained standing by the window. He said, it seems the conversation had been interesting. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard outside the door. Matthew listened, opened the door and said, did he imagine it? At that moment, a man in black robes with a hood over his head grabbed him by the face and dropped him to the floor. The boy panicked, wondering what was going on. He couldn't see anything. The protagonist's ominous voice told him not to move. Matthew realized with fear that his body really wasn't obeying him. He wanted to scream for help, but the protagonist rudely told him to shut his mouth and listen to what he had to say if he didn't want to die. Matthew panicked, thinking, is this intimidation? Is he really going to kill him now? The MC continued, asking if he understood him, to turn his head to the side. The boy obediently followed the order and was amazed to recognize Asari. The protagonist gloomily said that he should never dare touch his sister again. Did he understand him? At that moment, Matthew understood everything. He mustn't make this man his enemy. So, he nodded in agreement to his question. The second day of the physical training test had arrived. The protagonist, stretching his body, thought, perhaps being underestimated isn't such a good thing either. Perhaps he should give it his all. He assumed a fighting stance against the golem that Michaela had repaired. One of the students commented, strength and endurance are lousy, but this martial arts test is just brutal. His comrade replied, he doesn't feel like he can beat this thing at all. Another student, looking at MC, exclaimed, I'll be interested to see what this guy with zero magic will do in the physical training test. He called out to Matthew, but the boy was watching Asari closely. When the golem attacked the protagonist, he moved swiftly toward him, changing trajectory with incredible speed. As he approached the doll, he grabbed it by the head and pinned it to the floor, causing the device to shatter into pieces. Everyone stared in amazement at what was happening. The protagonist sheepishly apologized to Mikhail for breaking it. She, looking at the doll in confusion, exclaimed in amazement, "What's wrong with these freshmen these days?" He thought he seemed to be holding back quite a bit, but in reality, it was only his appearance. He'd never held back in murder, so it was complicated. Emma exclaimed in admiration. "He was so cool," he said sheepishly. "Really?" Yuri stared at him. Matthew's henchmen were muttering among themselves. "This guy doesn't have any magical powers. He's a commoner, right? He should be put in his place, so he won't get too cocky." At that moment, Matthew himself exclaimed, "Enough!" Everyone looked at him in amazement. He told his friends to ignore them. Commoners would never understand them, the aristocrats anyway. His comrades muttered his name in surprise, not understanding his position. Matthew approached Emma and said that if she was injured from yesterday, he'd take her to the doctor. The girl responded in amazement that she wasn't injured, but she appreciated his concern. He said, "Okay then." With that, he turned abruptly and left. They stared after him in surprise. Emma remarked in shock, "Does he really know how to apologize?" Yuri also exclaimed in amazement. "What was that? She's taking this all too positively." The girl looked at Sig and noticed that he hadn't apologized to them. The guy replied that he didn't really care. Let him say what he wants. MC thought, well, perhaps now there won't be any strange conflicts. Although he wasn't happy that this snob hadn't properly apologized to his sister. At that moment, Michaela caught the students' attention and joyfully announced that she thanked everyone for their diligence on the exam. The results were in. She pointed to the bulletin board. The tests showed that Yuri had placed 1st in magic and 7th in physical fitness. Emma placed 10th in magic and 101st in physical fitness. The hero's daughter had said those were not bad results. The girl responded, surprised even herself. Sig placed 98th in magic and 2nd in physical fitness. He asked, perplexed, "Isn't he in 1st place?" Asari placed last in magic and 1st in physical fitness. Matthew placed 4th in magic and 11th in physical fitness. Sig turned to the protagonist and asked him to fight him. The other students noted with envy. Now they understood why Yuri had become close to him. Was he undergoing some kind of special training? Yuri, listening to the students' gossip, thought, no one notices? They would understand if they looked at the protagonist's normal movements. He should be right-handed, but during this test, he just didn't use his right hand at all. The girl looked closely at her friend and wondered, who the hell is he? At that moment, MC remembered another episode from his life. His father entered a house on the edge of the forest and saw several dead people, their blood everywhere. He looked in surprise at his son, standing in the middle of the room with a bloody blade, and asked in amazement, did he do that? Asari, looking at his bloody hand, replied, yes, it is. He killed them. 12 years had passed since his first kill. After a while, he knocked on the classroom door and, apologizing for being late because he overslept, sat down. Michaela said in surprise, he's late, but she understood. The students began to whisper. This man had won 1st place in the physical fitness test the other day. He's often late, right? Matthew's friend said sarcastically, wouldn't he at least pretend to be a little sorry? Commoners have no manners at all. Matthew reprimanded them. He told them not to mess with him, hadn't he? The boys sheepishly apologized to him. Matthew apologized to the protagonist. Yuri glared at him. After class, she waited for the boy and said he'd suddenly gone quiet after the physical fitness test. That wasn't like him, or perhaps something had happened? Matthew glanced at her, turned away, and walked away, replying, nothing, really. The girl watched him go and thought that something strange had been happening around her ever since she'd entered this academy. She was sure of it, but she couldn't quite put her finger on anything specific. At that moment, Michaela approached her and said, she really is admirable, isn't she? Not only does she have excellent grades, but she also cares for the other students. Yuri countered, no, she still has a lot of growing to do, because her father still hasn't acknowledged her. Michaela smiled and said, and yet she, her teacher, is a state-licensed great mage, by the way. Even she was impressed. Let her believe her. If it's about her, the hero's daughter, she's confident, as a teacher, that she'll quickly achieve results. The girl beamed at her words and heartfeltly thanked her for such words. With that, Michaela bid her farewell and left. Yuri thought, looking out the window, if she's not satisfied with the current state of affairs, then she has no choice but to act on her own, right? After a while, a system window appeared, Philly indignantly telling the protagonist that what he did to Matthew was too much. He started making excuses. He pushed Emma. Under normal circumstances, that would warrant death. She said his job was to remain an ordinary student in public, right? Can you imagine what would happen if the hero's daughter discovered his true nature? It seems this child has a strong dislike for murderers. If his true nature is revealed, they can no longer be friends, and Emma won't be able to attend the academy. If that happens, his sister will be devastated, right? MC replied sheepishly. He understands that too. What his power is for. What he swore that day. Philly noted that if Yuri dies, Emma will definitely grieve. Those hunting the hero's daughter, judging by their coordination and timing, probably know the academy well from the inside. That's why she wants him to check everyone connected to the academy, including the board of directors and the student council. The cleaning woman asked, and what will they do? The girls paused. Asari smiled and said, besides, there's no problem working with them, right? Philly gasped inwardly. His smile was exactly like Crow's. Out loud, she declared that she understood. At that moment, Yuri approached Ferdius's office. A question came from within. Is he an assassin from Kokua? The girl thought in surprise. Kokua. She timidly knocked on the door, which was immediately opened by Ferdius's assistant. He informed his lord that his ward had come to see him. The lord smiled and remarked, "Have she grown up again?" He wanted her to forgive him, but Ray had told him not to give her too much pocket money. Yuri exclaimed indignantly, "That's not why she came. Tell him to remove her guard." Ferdius said, "What nonsense. They're hunting her now. If she doesn't put guards on her, the assassins will certainly strike." The girl said that's precisely why she would defeat them herself and catch them. The lord remarked, naively. She continued, "He knew perfectly well her true abilities, didn't he?" He replied, "Well, yes. He and her father had taught her fencing and magic since she was 5. However, an assassin organization, a professional killer, was involved in this matter." The girl thought in confusion. Assassins, Ferdius continued. "There was also an explosion in the suburbs the other day. They investigated, but they didn't get any information. Who, what device, and what exactly happened, absolutely nothing was known. It was too professional." Yuri's expression sank, and with a quiet anger, she replied, "I understand. They continue to disturb the peace her father created. She would never give in to such scoundrels." The lord lowered his head and told her not to approach the assassins and to concentrate on her studies. As for the guards, he wouldn't cancel the order. The assistant said she was no longer there. Ferdius exclaimed, "What?" The girl was truly gone. He said, "Well, as long as she has guards, the assassins certainly won't act rashly." At that moment, a young man burst into the office and informed the lord, apologizing for the sudden intrusion, that trouble had struck. Lady Yuri's guards, they say she defeated them all. Ferdius exclaimed in bewilderment. What was he talking about? And indeed, the girl's guards were sitting on the floor in the hallway, bound with strong ropes. At that moment, the hero's daughter herself entered the forest. She stood in the open and addressed the invisible assassin. She shouted, "Come on. She's created an opportune moment for an attack. Let him come out. He's been aiming at her all this time, hasn't he?" At that moment, something flashed in space, and she barely managed to dodge a projectile fired at her. She deftly deflected the next projectiles, and thought, throwing weapons. And that's it. She'll shoot them down again and again, until he runs out of shells. But then she noticed that the shells that fell to the ground were disappearing. The girl wondered in surprise, were they being picked up? The invisible enemy was attacking her again. While parrying the attack, Yuri noted the unpredictable trajectory, making it impossible to calculate the firing point. They didn't even appear from the darkness. How consistent they were. In that case, she had only one choice. After waiting for another shot, the girl caught one shell. The assassin firing at her thought in surprise, did she catch it with her bare hands? Yuri yanked the shell with all her might, and the assassin jumped out from his hiding place. The girl, looking at him, said with a smile, "Finally, they meet." But the assassin said, did she think that if she pulled it out, it meant she had won? At that moment, numerous shells flew at her. Yuri began to parry them and exclaimed, "Is he still using that?" She had already figured out his throwing weapon. The assassin instantly rushed towards her and shouted. He let her think that she had figured it all out. He raised his leg to strike and thought joyfully, "I caught it." But Yuri grabbed his leg, squeezed it tightly, and said, "She caught him again." He cried out in surprise. "Make her stop," he thought. Without letting go of the knife, she caught his kick so easily. He asked, "What kind of grip is that?" Turning around, she dealt him a powerful blow that sent him flying a considerable distance, hitting the ground painfully. Yuri said, approaching him, "It's over, and now she'll make him spill everything about his employer." The guy grinned and immediately entangled her in ropes. The girl, confused, realized she'd screwed up. The assassin, having tied her up tightly, said that if he'd only shown her the linear movements of the knife, she wouldn't have guessed he could control the blades with magic. They were dancing blades. He told her, didn't he? Why did he let her think she'd figured it all out? At that moment, she screamed, and when she stopped, she looked around in surprise, thinking, he's disappeared. What's going on here? At that moment, the protagonist pinned the killer's head to a tree and plunged the blade into it. He said out loud, "Relinquishing your defenses is reckless." Philly said, if not for the hawk's warning, it would have been his end. He responded, saying that was how he was able to protect her. Memories of saving his sister flooded his mind. Emma, as a little girl, had seen him kill criminals. She crawled up to him and, surprised and tearful, addressed her brother, mangling the word childishly. Sometime later, in the academy hallway, the protagonist encountered Yuri. She looked at him carefully and asked, has he disappeared again? MC, not expecting to see her, said her name in confusion. The girl said gloomily, she wanted him to tell her everything. Was he the one who saved her? Asari laughed awkwardly and replied, what was she talking about? He was just going to work right now. That's all. The girl interrupted him and told him to listen to her. If he killed someone to save her, then she would have to fight him. He wondered in confusion if he had killed someone. The day he first killed someone was the day he first protected something important. The protagonist told Yuri not to worry, it wouldn't come to that. After a while, the students looked at the information board, discussing the news, looking at Yuri's photo. They said the new student council member, Yuri Maxwell, had been confirmed. They said they were still accepting applications from candidates. Matthew's henchman grumbled, she again? Probably through connections, because of the hero. It can't be that they were only recruiting people into the student council through connections. Emma asked her brother if the student council was really that important. He replied that it was. They say the student council at their academy holds the real power. To become a council officer, a person's abilities and skills must be recognized. Emma noticed that Yuri had both talent and skill. No doubt about it, right? At that moment, Yuri walked past the students. Emma, watching her go, thoughtfully said, "Student council then." A while later, in the student council room, one of its members, Farid, said that although he was a newcomer among the officers, and from the lower classes at that, it seemed Matthew of the Valmont clan wasn't going to run for office. Another council member, Karma, spoke up unexpectedly. He didn't follow his older brother. Chloe, who was also a member of the student council, exclaimed that she couldn't care less about men from aristocratic families. The hero's daughter. She's so cute, isn't she? Then there would be no problem at all. Farrell remarked that if Yuri saw her face, she would run away too. He turned to Karma and clarified, "Wasn't that right?" Chloe, grabbing her weapon, exclaimed irritably, "What did he just say?" Karma said sullenly, "Please don't let her wave that at him." At that moment, the door to the office opened, and Lionel entered, announcing, "Everyone's here." The council members greeted him politely. Lionel was the student council president. He said, "So Yuri is the only student council officer candidate this year. Just think, there's not a single decent guy around." He suddenly tore his clothes and exclaimed, "How sad. Everything is so sad, but there's one person he's interested in." Chloe covered her face with her hands in embarrassment. Farid looked at the president with a smile, and Karma wondered, why is he undressing? After some time, Philly told the MC over the intercom that the assassin they defeated the other day was quite experienced. They probably realized that continuing in the same vein wasn't the best strategy. Whoever had sent the bandits might be inside the academy. Had he managed to follow up on any leads? Asari replied, yes. He checked everyone, from the faculty and students to their relatives, and assigned them to factions. Let them familiarize themselves with his information. With that, he sent his colleagues the results of his research. Lionel, showing the members the protagonist's personal card, had shouted at them to summon this guy to the student council. The protagonist, meanwhile, was still communicating with his group. He asked if the activity against Yuri had died down. Philly replied, yes, probably. The MC clarified, what about the student council? She said they were thoroughly investigating the information. Please, let him give them a little more time. Lionel is the student council president. He's quite a formidable opponent. Asari spoke thoughtfully. Actually, he'd just been summoned to the student council. Philly exclaimed in alarm. Summoned? What had he done? The protagonist replied, nothing, but it was just in time. He'd go there and check everything out personally. Approaching the office, he politely knocked on the door and heard permission to enter. The protagonist opened the door, asked permission to enter, and looked at Lionel, who was sitting languidly on the desk. He thought of this influential figure, who had promoted ideas of equality from a student's perspective and even changed the academy's morals. He was the pinnacle of the student council, maintaining order within the academy. The legendary hero of the academy, though still a student here. He wondered out loud where the other council members were. The president answered, asking them to leave. He seemed to dislike being watched. Surveillance magic was installed in various places throughout the academy. The student council kept these recordings and could recall them at any time, but he was surprised. Since he, Asari, joined, he has never been caught on camera. MC stared at him in confusion. Asari was a little confused by this and asked, is this a misunderstanding? He looked at him with a small smile and thought that it was not worth noticing that one student was not visible in the reflection. Could it be that he was used to dodging because it was disgusting to feel the radius of observation magic? This guy has amazing powers of observation. Lionel called his name and said that he knew who he was. He was an assassin, right? Even in an era of peace, old bad habits die hard. There were a couple of such people hiding in the academy too. He knew of their presence. He was surprised by what he heard and wondered if this was really why he called him here. Did he want to secretly eliminate him? Killing him here was not the best move. They were determined. However, unexpectedly for him, he said in a serious tone that he needed an assassin like him. He wanted to use his skills. He probably didn't know, but he was not the only one. This applies to many. However, he knows that the magical war ended 15 years ago, and everyone believes that the hero defeated the Demon King. However, this is not true. The Demon King was destroyed by an assassin. He wants to create a world of equality, starting with the academy. For this, he is ready to use any force. He can also become its force. He extended his hand to him, and the protagonist turned around, started to leave, and asked, the president apparently has a rich imagination, right? He was grateful for the fascinating story. He still kept his hand raised and said that it was understandable. If that was his intention, he had no choice. He used the rule of justice and said loudly that he was challenging him to a duel. If he wins, then he will join the student council. It is a special device available only to the student council. Until the duel is over, he will not leave this room. and the winner's demands will become law. He put on gloves with claws and said that he was beginning. He jumped towards him, missed his blow, and very quickly bounced off the walls, ceiling, and floor. He dodged his fast strikes with a calm expression and thought that he was like a wild animal. Lionel stopped and asked, "Is he going to keep dodging like this? He also has that same assassin device, right?" He looked at him and said that he told you he is not an assassin. He landed on the floor and asked, "Is he still pretending? Then he will knock out his device with his attack." He began to concentrate. His body was engulfed in strong energy, and he asked if he could keep up with him at such speed. He ran up to him very quickly, delivered a strong punch, but MC managed to block this attack. He was pushed back, and he thought that not only was he fast, but also this amount of electricity. The rumors were not lying about this guy. He is incredibly strong. He was able to hit him with another attack and said with a smile that electricity is an interesting thing. If you put this into overclocking mode, you can strengthen your own body, or conversely, make your opponent's muscles cramp. You can also make him kneel, but there is nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone becomes like that in front of him. Unexpectedly for Lionel, he knocked him to the ground with a sweep, grabbed his arm, pinned him to the ground, and put his fingers to the back of his head. He apologized and said that he was quite resistant to electric shocks. He raised his head and asked, when he hit him the first time, he pretended that the electric shock worked, right? He asked him to put away the device and admitted defeat. He said in a calm tone that it was his fingers. He was very surprised by this and thought that it couldn't be. What was directed at him felt like a crushing force, as if his life was clenched in a fist. All this was not with the help of a device, but just his fingers. He bowed to him and said loudly that it was complete defeat. Assassins really are amazing, right? Asari, looking confused, said that he won this time only because he lured him out, making him let his guard down. He was no match for him in a fair fight, and besides, he was not an assassin. He took off his shirt and said loudly that sooner or later he would force him to serve him. He became even more confused because of this and said that he would not serve anyone. The student council members entered the office, called the president, and Karma told the president that he had brought a newcomer who had volunteered to become a new member of the council. Lionel allowed him to enter, and he turned around and wondered, "Is this a member of the student council?" He relayed the president's words. Emma entered, introduced herself, and said that she heard about Yuri joining. She thought that she would also join the student council and help make the academy better. She bowed and said that she was pleased to meet them. She hoped for their goodwill. He called her and said, "Welcome to the student council." The protagonist was very surprised by this and was about to ask something, but she asked why he was on the student council. He turned to the council members and asked, her abilities had already been measured, right? Farid said that her overall abilities were average, but her magic power test results were excellent. He said with a calm expression that he saw it and acknowledged it, so that was enough for him. He smiled and said that he was honored that he trusted him. Was he really going to accept him, who had zero magic power and whom he didn't acknowledge, into the student council? He said with a smile, "What about that? He lost the duel, so he can't force him to join." They were all surprised by this, and Yuri said that she thought it was unlikely. But to think that he even defeated the president. He said that the president simply let his guard down. It was a coincidence. She walked up to Emma with a smirk and said that it was a pity, though she was going to enjoy the fun life on the student council with her. He was surprised by this, called the student council president, and said that he was asking to be accepted into their employ. Lionel was surprised by this, and with a happy expression said that it was clear that he had chosen to serve him. He had good insight. She called him by name and said that it looked like she would be able to see him more often than before. "Nice to meet you." Sometime later, two students were arguing with each other in the hallway, and Emma, looking confused, asked them to stop, but they did not listen. She raised her voice, but they still did not pay attention to her, and she wondered what to do. They were not listening to her at all. A student approached her and asked, she was from the student council, right? She had to somehow sort out this fight. One of the students took out a device and said that was enough. If he did not understand the words, then he would have to explain by force. She became worried about this and thought that if he used the device, it would end with more than just minor injuries. She stood between them and loudly said that he couldn't use that. He said loudly with a displeased expression that she should get out of the way or he would knock her down along with him. She closed her eyes in fear. But at that moment, MC ran up to that student and grabbed his head. Yuri also came up to them and tied up the students. He approached her and asked, "Is that all?" She turned to him and said that she had already checked with observation magic. The students looked at her and said that this is the hero's daughter. So this is the guy who ranked first in the physical fitness test this year? They approached Emma and he asked if she was okay. She agreed, and she said in a friendly manner that she could just leave the brute force to them and everything would be fine. Teacher Hermatos came to them and asked what all the noise was about. They turned to him and said that there had been a fight. They were just about to explain the situation to them. The students who were about to fight loudly said that a commoner had hit them, so they were the ones who started the fight. The teacher listened to them and asked, "So, the reason was that a commoner didn't know his place and was rude to an aristocrat, so they decided to suppress it unilaterally by force?" They were surprised by this, and the aristocratic students looked at them with smirks. He approached Yuri and said that it seemed that barbarian blood couldn't help but seek out quarrels. He was surprised when he realized who she was, and said with a smirk that if his students suffered any consequences that couldn't be cured by magic, he would sue the student council for this very reason. They should learn this too. After some time, in the cafeteria, she said with a displeased look that this jerk infuriated her so much. He only treated aristocratic students well. Asari sat in front of her and said, "What does that mean? There's a teacher who so openly favors aristocrats." She said they said he competed with her father for honors during the Wizarding War. Of course, her father won hands down. He probably still harbored a grudge for the defeat. He thought about it. Such blatant discrimination. Was he really the one hunting her? He looked at Emma, sitting next to him, and asked what had happened to her. Had she lost her fighting spirit? She asked why they were both so strong. He was a little confused by this, and said that he trains every day, 100 repetitions for all muscle groups and a 10-kilometer run. He thought that he couldn't say that his body was modified. She was surprised by this. And Yuri said that she had been trained since early childhood by her father and a man who looked like an uncle. She said that I see, so it was all about training. She looked at her chain and said that, however, she realized that she was able to unlock her potential only after meeting this guy. The device that her father specially prepared for her, sometimes she feels it. This little one speaks to her, although, of course, devices can't talk. It sounds doubtful, but there are rumors that devices can also be alive. She wants to hear Revatin's voice. She understood her, and he leaned towards her and asked she shouldn't get into dangerous situations, okay? He will do everything for her. Emma turned to him with a smile and agreed. After some time, she was sleeping and thought she heard a voice that didn't sound like her brother or Yuri. She was holding an unfamiliar device in her hand, but she woke up and realized it was a dream. But she really did have this item in her hand. She brought it to the teacher. She wrote it down and asked, "This is the lost thing, right?" She accepted it. She walked down the hallway with a smile and thought that whoever lost this must be very worried. Since the morning, she had such a pleasant feeling, as if she had done a good deed. In the hallway, she met Lionel and wished him good morning. He called her and said that she was here just in time. He took out a small book and said that it was a request that had been received by the student council. He thought that she was perfect for this, so he wanted to entrust it to her. What would she say about it? She read the contents and was very surprised because of it. After some time, she came into the building, where she began to comb the rabbit, and with a happy look asked, "Do you like it?" A girl holding a similar rabbit approached her and said that, unlike monsters, magical beasts have a habit of becoming attached to people. However, this was the first time she had seen one become so attached so quickly. They were short-staffed, so this really helped them out. Emma, with a happy expression on her face, said that this was the best job in the world. Another student, looking displeased, picked up the rabbit and loudly said that this guy had messed up his uniform. He threw it on the ground, which greatly surprised the girls standing nearby. She was indignant at what had happened and loudly asked if he even realized what he had done. He, looking displeased, said that she should shut up and stop exaggerating. It was just a tool anyway, no big deal. However, at that very moment, the rabbit he had thrown let out a loud roar and grew in size. She loudly said that if you harm a magical beast, it will go berserk. The other student started carrying the rabbits away from the scene, and the frightened student fell to the floor and loudly asked why she brought such a dangerous thing. She said loudly with a worried look that if she behaved normally, he was calm, even calmer than him. The rabbit growled angrily, looking at him. Emma ran up to him, helped him up, and told him that he should run away from here. He ran away, and she stood in front of the beast with a worried look and wondered what to do. She ran without thinking, but what could she do? Suddenly she heard an inhuman voice that said that she could use it. She was surprised when she took the device out of her pocket and loudly asked why it was here again. The device asked, she needs power to get out of this mess, right? It transformed into a staff when she said that she didn't really understand what was happening, but she was asking for its power. It laughed loudly and said that she could consider herself lucky. He's going to smash everything here to pieces. She was very confused by this and said that he should calm down a bit. The rabbit attacked her. She started to run away, and the device asked if its voice reached her, which means she has pretty good magical power, right? She should pour her magic into it and the battle would begin. She refused this and asked if he wants to harm this baby, right? He said loudly that of course, he is a weapon after all. She should use it. Let her hands get stained with blood. He likes to watch pure girls like her get dirty. She said in a displeased tone that he should stop talking nonsense. Isn't it possible to stop this baby without harming him? He looked a little surprised and said that even if you do that, it's not interesting at all. She said with an upset look that this means he can't do it, but he acts like he's above everyone else. The device changed, and he said loudly that he certainly can. Don't underestimate him. Emma caught the rabbit in a magical bubble, and it shrank in size. She admired it and said it was amazing. Everything returned to normal. He said that he had promised to handle it. He thought that she had done it after all. Her magical power is simply insane. There is no one better than her. It seems it will be possible to gradually corrupt her. Hermashos came to this place and said that he heard a noise and came to take a look. Is the student council up to something again? A student was about to say something to him, but Emma approached him and said that regarding whether he is a noble or not, She thinks there are more important things. He looked at her and asked what she meant. She shamed the student, saying that animals should not be harmed, that should be obvious. Regarding today's incident, on behalf of the student council, she wants to express her official objection. The protagonist and Yuma came to this place, saw her, and she said that it seems she handled it herself. He was surprised by this. She came up to him and asked in a happy tone, did he come to see her? He was going to ask something about injuries, but changed his mind, patted her on the head, and said that she was doing well. She did well. She was happy with the praise, and she came up to her and asked, is this by any chance her device? She agreed and mentally asked, is this so? He said that she should come up with a name for him. Then both in name and in essence he will become her device. She thought about it, and with a happy look said that this baby will be called Kako. He was indignant because of this, loudly called this name pathetic, and the others thought it was cute. After some time she came to the hall, where the teacher officially called her and said that she stopped the incident with the magical beasts and protected the order and peace in the academy. In recognition of her merits, they give her a medal. Emma happily accepted it and thanked him for it. The students started applauding, and Hermatos looked on with a displeased expression. He thought she had received one of the 7 great sacred wands, the guild sage. To think that some commoner had been chosen as one of the academy's legendary sacred wands. Later, in the hallway, a student called Matthew and said that they needed to do something about these commoners. Otherwise, the situation of the nobles would change. He didn't wait to hear the rest and said that he knew about it. Another student looked at him and asked, does he really not understand? Lately, he seemed to be filled with fear of commoners. They had all placed their hopes on the Valmont family. Their parents had even ordered him to be accepted into their circle. And what was he going to do about it? The student approached them, asked them to wait, and said that they shouldn't blame him alone for everything. Hermatos called them shameful and asked, they allowed the commoners to prove themselves, and now they're shifting responsibility onto each other. And aren't they ashamed? They were nobles, people of noble blood. He was also extremely disappointed. Matthew gritted his teeth and wondered why this had happened. He had heard that Yuri was just a commoner who had fought her way up, and Asari was supposed to be a lowly being without a drop of magical power. He had underestimated them. His own arrogance had led to this result. That's right. If he fought with full preparation, he wouldn't lose. He simply couldn't lose. He said with a serious expression that he would fight her again and prove his victory. He leaned towards him with a sly grin and said that was good. In that case, he would personally oversee his individual training. The student leaned towards him and asked if he was all right. This professor had a terrible reputation. He followed Hermatos and thought that indeed, they said the professor was conducting strange experiments. His lessons were truly Spartan drill, simply terrifying. However, it was true that he was one of the most outstanding teachers in this academy. They reached the door to the basement. He turned to him and said with a grin that he should come in. Matthew walked there with a determined look and thought that if this man was going to train him, then these 2 commoners should wait. MC was monitoring what was happening, called Tak, and said that he wanted to ask for surveillance on the person he had just sent out. She asked, he had done quite thorough preliminary reconnaissance, hadn't he? The more information they had about the target, the easier it was to track them, so that was a big help. He said that when he was on the student council, it was easy to get any information. She said with a smile that he should entrust this to her. No matter how far they were, her eyes would be keeping a close eye on them. He said that she was a very reliable person. She said that in return, when this mission was over, about her, he should pat her on the head. Since he still owed her for last time, he would have to pat her on the head twice. He hesitantly agreed, and she was very happy about it and said loudly that it was his firm promise. He ended the connection and thought that talking to someone like her was tiring. He looked to the side and thought with a serious expression that the one behind all this and aiming at Yuri was most likely him. Sometime later, at the Fiana Academy arena, Yuri looked at the crowd of people in the stands and asked if this was too grandiose. This was such an important event. Asari stood nearby and said that many were probably interested in seeing the power of the hero's daughter. Lionel said that if she showed her strength, the scales would surely tip in favor of the equality party. She asked, did he like this, right? He agreed, and Hermatos called him and asked, did he understand what was happening, right? He would not tolerate defeat. Matthew, with a determined expression on his face, agreed. He looked at the slug crawling on his arm with a sly grin and thought that it was true. He could not lose. He threw the slug onto his neck and it burrowed under his skin. When they both entered the arena, Lionel loudly declared that from now on, the duel between the 2 students was declared open. He began to release magical drops of water and thought that today he would finally prove his strength. She looked at it, and he loudly declared that it was a splash bomb, a projectile of water bubbles. She deflected all the projectiles with her sword, and the surprised students loudly said that it was just like that time. Even with the advantage of water over fire, his water could do nothing. As expected, she had the advantage. They continued to fight, and Emma, with a thoughtful look, said that something strange was happening. She's not even attacking? The protagonist, with a serious expression, thought that he continued to use spells without a break. With such tactics, his mana should soon run out. The student saw a large amount of water and loudly asked, "What is it?" Matthew created a huge amount of water and used the spell Tidal Wave, Wrath of the Water Dragon. He said loudly in a serious tone that this was the highest magic passed down in the Valmont family. Yuko was surprised by what she saw and used the Wall of Flame spell, a barrier of incinerating fire. She managed to contain this attack, but a very powerful explosion occurred. Because of this, fog rose and they could not see anything. She withstood this attack and wondered if he had really become that strong. However, she could not lose. He looked at the tool in his hand with a smile and said with a wide grin that mana was simply boiling inside him. With this scenario, he definitely would not lose. A slug was crawling under his skin, and the audience was very surprised when he used this powerful technique again. They were very surprised because he used this spell constantly and admired him. MC watched what was happening with a serious expression and said that this was not all. He continued to attack with magic, but stopped when he saw a silhouette in the fog. When the fog disappeared, he noticed it was a cloak tied to a sword stuck in the ground. At that moment, he saw her quickly running toward him with a determined expression. Matthew was surprised by this and asked if she had hooked the cloak onto the device and used it as bait. However, she was completely unarmed then, so he misjudged. He noticed her finger gesture, and Yuri used teleportation, spatial transference. She teleported the sword to her hand, delivered a very fast blow, and stopped the blade before his throat. He was shocked by what happened, and the organizer loudly announced that the duel was over. She had won this duel. She began to leave, and the spectators said that the hero's daughter was truly impressive. This purebred aristocrat looks pathetic. Hermatos looked at him with a displeased expression and said that he had lost again. He would not forgive this. Asari began to leave, and the device on his hand warned that movement was detected. Sometime later, Matthew woke up in an unknown place, his hands tied, and Michaela stood before him, calling him stupid and weak and wishing him a good morning. She said with a smile that she brought him here while he was sleeping. This is her room. This is an exciting individual lesson. She really had high hopes for him, and yet, even after receiving magical power from teacher Hermatos, he still lost. Just how talentless is he? He didn't understand what she meant, and she leaned over to him, took out a slug, and said that it was the teacher's magical creature. She used it as a conduit to give him the teacher's magical power. Hadn't he noticed it? After he fired water magic so stupidly? He couldn't believe it, and she threw the slug aside and said that since the teacher's method wasn't enough, she decided to lend her power too. She lifted the cloth, showed the mutated magical beast, and said that he should see the results of his experiment. She manipulates the magical power of magical creatures and turns them into other living beings. It's magnificent, isn't it? She'll do the same to him. Although he'll most likely no longer be able to live as a human, they'll definitely be able to kill Yuri this time. She held a syringe with unknown contents in her hand with a smile, but stopped when she heard someone behind her call her name and say that she seemed to like it. It was the protagonist, hiding his appearance under clothes, and asked if he could participate too. She asked, "What is he talking about? She's just mentoring a student who's no good at fighting, that's all." He didn't listen to her, threw the knife, and it hit the chandelier so that it would fall on her. When it fell, he calmly said that it was to kill before speaking. He simply adopted that from the old man. Unexpectedly for him, Michaela created a powerful stream of air, and when the dust cleared, he saw that she was unharmed. She asked with a smile, "That's a pretty dangerous instruction, don't you think?" Even though he still hadn't been able to kill her. He thought that after that, she was standing there without a single scratch, just like in the intelligence. She looked at the knife with the rope he used, and thought that it was the same device as that child's knife. She said that now it was clear that he was the one who thwarted the assassination attempt on Yuri. Who was he? He said that this meant that she admitted her involvement in the assassination attempt. She calmly spun the device in her hand and said that he was the one who interfered. He came to her himself. It's not scary to talk to someone who is soon to die, right? Matthew said loudly that he didn't know who he was, but he had to help him. She turned to him and with a frightening expression asked if he could please be quiet for a bit. He was very scared because of this, remembered the past, and thought that it was like then, his voice wouldn't come out. MC looked at her and thought that during the magical war she killed many demons. A noble woman, nicknamed the Lady in Blood. He said, "Just think, a war hero has become a teacher and is plotting to kill her own student." Michaela looked away and said that she wanted to raise outstanding magicians from noble families. However, because the hero gained power, the position of the nobility was now under threat. This trend must be stopped. She couldn't personally raise a hand against the students, so she sent an assassin after Yuri. He thought she was saying this because she was trying to modify Matthew. Was this a sign that she had lost her composure? She let her hair down, tossed her glasses aside, and with a frightening smile said that if she eliminated this obstacle herself, everything would be solved. She hadn't fought seriously for a long time. She was holding some kind of device in her hands, and he pulled out a gun and shot her without a second thought. This attack had no effect on her again, and she said with a slight displeasure that the teacher hadn't finished speaking yet. Bad children need to be taught a lesson. She began spinning the device in her hand and used Sylphid's skill, Breath of Death. She released quick streams of energy, grazed him, and left a small scratch. He was surprised by this, and then began to dodge very quickly. She also grazed his cheek, and when the attack stopped, he wiped the blood from his face and thought that he should have dodged, but the blows still hit. She began to laugh with a mad smile and said that no matter how he tried to dodge, the wind, constantly changing shape, was sure to injure its target. She also repels any attack with wind pressure and remains without a single scratch, and it gradually fades. What a pleasure. He calmly said that now I understand why they call her the Blood Lady. She attacked again with a stream of air, and he protected his head with his hands. Michaela said in a joyful tone that this sound of cutting flesh and dripping blood, he should let her hear it more. He thought that things were bad. If he used the device at maximum power, it should be possible to blow away even her wind barrier. However, he cannot use such power inside the academy building. He continued to receive numerous blows from the wind, and Matthew looked at it and thought that it was a one-sided fight. As expected, the teacher was strong. They had already gotten to him, and then they would get to him too. She said that if this continued, he would die. Asari thought that this was really bad. He asked, maybe that was enough already? She was slightly surprised when he walked towards her with a frightening look, ignoring all the attacks. She couldn't believe it and wondered, was he just walking towards her so calmly? Any person, any living creature, instinctively closes their eyes the moment an attack is about to hit. Moreover, if the attack causes pain, it is natural to recoil. She continued to attack with the wind, and in a frightened tone asked loudly why he didn't stop. She saw his frightening look, stopped attacking, called him a monster, and asked him not to come closer. He grabbed her head with one hand, which scared Michaela even more, and said loudly that he should stop this madness. He squeezed her head very hard, which made her lose consciousness. She fell to the ground, and he thought that during the Wizarding War, there were rumors about a legendary killer, the Crimson Raven. The mask fell from his face and he said goodbye to the teacher in a calm tone. After some time, Hermatos ran into the office and loudly called Matthew. He also called his name, and he began to untie his hands and said that he came to his room, but found traces of the kidnapping. He looked for him everywhere. He helped him to his feet and said that they would talk later, and now he should rest. He got scared when he noticed a slug on his hand, called the professor and asked, he's not special, right? He started crying, and he took him by the head and said that he should listen to him. He wanted to give him confidence, but his instruction went too far. He was also in a hurry. From now on, they will think together about how to become stronger, so he shouldn't give up. Sometime later, in the cafeteria, Emma said that Professor Michaela suddenly resigned. The protagonist sat in front of her and thought that she seemed to be grieving. In public, the teacher acted like a teacher who supported both commoners and was also a good mentor to her. He noticed the displeased expression on Yuri's face and asked why she looked so displeased. She said that it seemed like the main organizer who tried to kill her had been caught. He asked, then why did she look upset? She stood up abruptly and said loudly in a displeased tone that it was because she wanted to catch him herself. She wondered who arranged this. By the way, after yesterday's fight, he and Matthew. She didn't have time to finish because Emma took her hand and happily said that this was good. She was really very happy. She laughed, thanked her, and said they should go to the city together again. Sometime later, he went to his room, began to undress, and thought that he hoped that his life at the academy would now be a little calmer. He looked at himself in the mirror and said that all of yesterday's wounds had disappeared. At the same time, Michaela sat tied up in prison, and Ferdius, with a thoughtful look, said that she was being detained on charges of harming the heir of Valmont. It was precisely at that moment when suspicions that she was behind the attempt on Yuri's life became especially strong. How did they manage to detain someone of such rank? The worker bowed his head to him and said that even Professor Hermatos, who discovered her, did not know the details. However, it was known for sure that everything ended within the academy. He asked with a serious expression, Crimson Crow assassin? Is he really still alive and at the academy? If he exists, he wants to recruit him to their side. They must establish his identity as soon as possible. The worker asked, isn't that just a rumor? He looked out the window and said that there are those who will notice the existence of the one who defeated marksmen, just like they did. The assassins hiding in the academy will also begin to act. The mutual exposure of the Crimson Crow assassins will begin right now.